Okay, so wow, that was intense, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being in the meditation with me, and like this is really a beautiful part of Corinthians to use. It's like we shall all be changed. That's so comforting to me to hear that. Like we shall all be changed. So it's not like I have to change myself or I have to do, and then no. The mystery, like the mystery, behold, I'll tell you a mystery. The mystery is that you shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye, just like that. Like, just like that. That's no struggle, there's no whatever it is. No, it's not you doing anything, it is happening to you. This is what is so amazingly comforting to me. Like, so great. That's why I had to share it with you. Like, oh, that is so beautiful, because it's so sudden. It's so sudden. Like one moment, it is like that. It's like the change is instantaneous. Like you didn't see it coming. Whoosh, there it is. That's what I love about it, and that's my experience of it too. It's like, no, you don't. You cannot facilitate it with your intellect, with your mental no powers, and all this. Like that is all not going to work, and not even your like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. No, you're not. You're not doing it at all. So that's the great thing. You shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye, just like that, just like that. So thank you for meditating with me or contemplating using it in a prayer. It's in fact like this is the way it is. It is helping me to let go of ideas that I think that I need to facilitate a change, or that my motivation is no, you're a child of God. This change that is occurring is just returning home. Like you never left, it's returning home, and so you can't miss it. And it is just a matter of, say, getting some ideas out of the way, or the change that needs to occur, but it's done for you. Even that is done for you. You don't have to change yourself. Definitely not do it. Don't change yourself. So that's so beautiful. So what do you need to do then? So what do you need to do? So Joel is talking a lot about that in all his talks, like in all his 8, 9, maybe 1,000 talks that he had, that were recorded at least. He is always sharing that too. It's like, how do you get to it? Well, take your time during the day to actually become quiet. It's not that you have to change yourself. No, you just become quiet. Just step out of where you were in a moment ago, and allow a change to occur. It's like, just give it, at least that you're aware that this is occurring in you, because it's taking place in you. The change is taking place in you. You will discover that there's nothing about you that can die. You will discover that you're not this corruptible body, but it's put on incorruption. It is literally transfigured. It is going to be transfigured, but it is transfigured, like it's accomplished. And the change that is taking place at the sound of the last trumpet, it's like the last trumpet is then really the last trumpet of ignorance, the last trumpet of denial. That's when the change will occur. If you stop denying, you see that the change has occurred, that you were successful, and that you are risen. Like, I'm risen indeed. I'm literally resurrected. And that becomes the experience. So in the talks of Joel, you see this too. So today I took out 2 expressions in the talk. I can talk a little bit about the talk itself, because this is a very specific point in Joel's teaching sequel, so to speak. It is really a different point. Suddenly he sees himself cancel all kinds of meetings that were scheduled, like for months. He was booked for months, and he skips every appointment. He skips all of it. He's not going to travel. He's not going to do this the way that he planned it, and yeah, all these occurrences are taking place. So he thinks he steps into a year of retirement, which is very interesting to me to hear that. It's like retirement. But yeah, so what is this retirement? That's a human idea of what you think is going on. So is that going to happen? No, not at all. No. So he is teaching up to his last day. And it's like his last day before he passes on, and continues his mission without this corruptible idea about himself. So wonderful. And he's still continuing. See, we're coming together in the recognition of Master Joel, who is talking to us, who is actually sharing with us all that he shared with many, and keeps doing that on a very individual basis by you asking for it and being in connection with him. He instructs you. He does that too. It's like he's not gone somewhere. He's not away or anything. No, that would be, you would miss out on the immediate, say, direct contact that is possible with him right now too. He's right here with us. That is the beauty of this. So you see, that's interesting in reading the talk or reading the transcript of the talk, or listening to the talk, letting him share it, seeing that all his plans he crosses off. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. And then suddenly he finds himself everywhere again. So that's really beautiful to see that, because he did do a lot of recordings in 1963 too. So that on the side. So the two quotes that I came up with that I love to share with you, I put this here. You saw maybe already one of them. So wait, I have to share this with you. So now you can read it on your screen in a moment. Yeah, there it is. So it's like quote 1 and quote 2. So I got two quotes today. One quote, yeah, quote is a word. One quote is this: until you train yourself, or else receive a divine inspiration or impartation to the effect that there is but one power, you never will have the fourth dimensional consciousness. So this is the first quote. Until you can train yourself or else receive a divine inspiration or impartation to the effect that there is but one power, you never will have the fourth dimensional consciousness. Now that is a bit confusing if I read it just like that. So, but I love the idea. First, train yourself or receive divine inspiration or impartation so that you recognize that there is only one power. It's like, that's great. So whatever works to come into the realization of that there is only one power, by training, by divine inspiration, by impartation, literally receiving a download or having an experience of it, recognizing that there is only one power. And the power is like within you, not anywhere else, not outside of you. You recognize that, yes, it's all within me. It's within me that it's happening. So that is a great expression. So the thing is then, this is how it can come to you, by training. So it asks training of you to let this occur. It's like, if you don't realize that there is one power, you will not enter into these. Joel says it with the word have, and that's a bit where I say like, well, that's difficult to read. Having you will never have the fourth dimensional consciousness, or the timelessness consciousness, or the Christ mind. That would be an easier way to say it. Like, you would never have the Christ mind experience if you don't know that there's one power. So to make this clear, in the way that it came to me, is this is like this Christ mind of yours is with you all the time, is in you, is your true self. So that's not something you can lose or not have, or no, you cannot have it in the first place. It's given. You're a holy son of God. You know, it's like, that's given. You are created by God. So there's no having involved in this whatsoever. So this makes that clear to me, at least. It's like, that makes it clear. There's no such thing as heaven here. Having here, it is given. It's creation. It's given to you. It's, you are created. You are created out of God, so to speak. It is you're a whole part of God. You're one with God. So you can never lose that. No. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's another very comforting idea. So it is not that I've lost anything. It is not that I've lost anything. Something happened to my consciousness, which was this idea that I thought I could be separate from everything that is. The thought that I could be separate from God. That scared me so much that I got myself into a nightmare, in which I think that disease, disaster, and death are real. And that makes me afraid on a daily basis, as long as I believe that there's a power outside myself that is influencing me. Realizing that there is one power that does not have any opposition, but is a power in itself. It is, say, manifested from my withinness into everything. Then you see that the fear is gone. If I realize that, then the fear is gone. If I realize that I say I'm an extension of the love of God, yeah, you could say, like, I'm realizing my Christ mind, my true heritage. Like, I'm an effect of God. Like, that's where I come from, not from anywhere else. And I experienced that. In my experience of that, you could say that is the fourth dimension. That is the dimension beyond the three-dimensional world, beyond the world of form and time and fragments, subjects, atoms, molecules, you name it. All this stuff that we made up, coming forth from an idea of separation. You know, everything that has a name, like this is an atom, that's a molecule, that's a body, that's a nose, that's an eye. All this is like, that is all the fragmented world of a mind that is not whole, but God himself, say, fragmented into every little thingy, making a name for it even. Big dictionaries, libraries full of descriptions in order to set it all right. Otherwise you wouldn't know it existed, and otherwise you wouldn't know it was something that belongs to this separate state. So you could say that this world is a manifestation of your split-mindedness, of your, say, three-dimensional thinking. And that is based on an idea that there are different powers, that there are external powers, that there are other people, that there are things that you cannot control whatsoever, powers that are opposing you and limiting you, and all this stuff that in your human way of thinking is very familiar to you. So this implodes in you, coming all together. It literally like implodes in you in the twinkling of an eye. Suddenly that is not going to work anymore. You realize that there is one power and it has no opposition, and it's everywhere, and it's the only thing there is. It's my oneness. So that is what came up for the first quote. So the second one is this. I share. Yep. And this is more like an application. Quote 2. The attempt to use truth to overcome error is exactly the same as trying to use truth or some other means to overcome the mirage in the desert. The attempt to use truth to overcome error is exactly the same as trying to use truth or some other means to overcome the mirage in the desert. Well, that's a nice metaphor. So I really love metaphors, so this is like, yes, that's great. So this is another one. It's like, oh yeah, wait a minute. That, of course, Joe is always teaching this, in fact. Like, we're not praying for anything. We're not praying for a healthy body. We're not praying for a healthy financial situation. We're not praying for companionship. We're not praying for, well, you name it. There must be some more subjects you can pray for. Not to make that work or fix that or, using truth to adjust what you're perceiving, to adjust your idea about the situation that you think you're in. And why is this? Why shouldn't we do that? Like, why shouldn't we pray for something, for a better world or a better mirage, a better relationship, a better financial situation, or a better this and a better that? Why shouldn't you? Like, there's a God, right? There's a God who has all power. See, the thing is then the delay, in fact, the delay. You can almost hear the echo of your thoughts in the past in which you were thinking this. What I mean with that is this, it's like the fact that you think that God needs to give you something to adjust this image of yourself that you don't like, and that is very uncomfortable for you and it's very real to you at the same time. The fact that you ask God to do something for that is literally like putting yourself in an idea that you're separate from God. Because don't forget, like, I and my Father are one. We're literally made of the same stuff. Like, we're made out of love. And God is what love is. God is what love is. And so seeing that's reasonable when I say it like this, conceptually you can get that too. It's like you are created whole and perfect. This is the only thing I need to remember, to see all my wanting and all my desires and all my things that I think are missing, to see that resolve. Literally, like, that was what death was. That is what corruptible is. You know, it's like corruptible. That is what temporal is. That is what mortal is. It is mortal. It is death. It is limitation. It's death, disease, disaster. All that stuff. Like, all that is representation of the idea of death. And that has been changed, and has been changed for you as well. So it holds no reality whatsoever. So God doesn't know anything about that, literally, because he knows who he created, his only beloved Son, in whom he is well pleased, with no exception, like absolutely no exception. And this goes too far for you in your idea about yourself. It's like, well, that certainly is not about me. Let's be honest. Like, that's not about me because, no, well, you got your list. All things that you think are incomplete. See how much ignorance that is? So, and this trumpet will sound. The last trumpet will sound and you will be changed. in the twinkling of an eye, like without even your help. Well, in fact, the denial will stop, you know, so you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to deny your perfection. That saves you a lot of work. That saves you a lot of work. So it's interesting to talk about this in this way. You see that I come from a certain, say, point of view in order to share this with you. And that's great. Like, that is so clear in my mind. Like, that's so clear that I cannot step out of that. Like, I cannot step out of it. Now you can call that like, okay, so your mind awakens. When it's awake, it's awake. Like, you cannot be fooled about the limitation, disease, disaster, and the whole shebang. You cannot be fooled by it any longer, because there's only one power, and it starts here. It's like, starts from within, coming through you into this world, if you want, or into the kingdom, if you want. Like, however you experience that, and you see that you just become a co-creator of God himself, extending your love into the kingdom, adding your joy to that. And in fact, that is it. You know, that is it. That is it. So this is not directly acceptable in some way for you, maybe, or maybe it is. But it's like, so you don't need to understand this for it to work. So this is all about realization, and that is going to be given to you by training, by an impartation, or by a spiritual, say, a revelation. It can come to you. So these things are here, say, available to you. And so training then is great. Like, training not to let yourself be fooled anymore by what you see and by what you feel, the concerns that you had, the great ideas that you have for the future to survive, or the great ideas that you have for your retirement. Cancel all your appointments and you'll see that your calendar is still filled. You know, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. You're not in charge here at all. It's like, you're not in charge. You learn to listen. So be still. On a moment-by-moment basis, everything will be given to you exactly as you can receive it. In the moment, you don't have to plan for the future. You don't have to consider what to eat, what to drink, what to wear, or any of this. It's like, that is all not necessary. Look at all the things that you don't have to do. It's amazing. So you have time to stay in your peace of mind. Wow, great. So I think it must be almost time, yeah. So I want to take like 25 minutes to listen to Joel at least. So, and with a little break that we're going to take now, then it should all work out. So that's amazing.
How are you going to get infinity into your mind? Therefore, prayer, which is a knowing of the truth, is an absolute silence, stillness, receptivity. Then when that deep breath comes, a click or a message, truth has revealed itself to you. You don't know the truth. Truth has revealed itself to you, but not to your mind, within your consciousness, which also is as infinite as truth. There's a difference between knowing with your mind and knowing with your consciousness. Then, why will it be impossible to outgrow the letter of truth and the principles that comprise the healing principles of the infinite way? Because it is by the means of this human knowing of the truth, the correct principles of truth, that we develop the spiritual consciousness that receiveth the things of God. In other words, until you can train yourself or else receive a divine inspiration or impartation to the effect that there is but one power, you never will have the fourth dimensional consciousness. Because consciously or unconsciously, you will be trying to use one power to overcome the other one. You'll be trying to use truth to overcome error. And in that way, you never can enter the fourth dimensional consciousness. Because there is no truth in that whole procedure. Since there is but one power, God being infinite power, there are no powers to be overcome. Therefore, you would be dealing entirely with a mythological proposition or a dream. The attempt to use truth to overcome error is exactly the same as trying to use truth or some other means to overcome the mirage in the desert. Just think that if you were to see a great big ocean in the desert and then ran to get a pipeline to drain it out, when there isn't any water there. So it would be trying to use truth to overcome an error that in truth has no existence. In the same way, you have all witnessed the fallacy of praying to God to save dear Mrs. Jones, who is such a lovely woman and has 4 beautiful children to raise, and then dear old God does nothing about it except provide a funeral. And then we say, how could that happen? Oh, how could God do that and leave these 4 innocent children? But after you've witnessed that thing long enough, you'll know that all the prayers to God to do something for humanity have just been a waste of time throughout all ages, except in proportion as here and there someone has developed a tremendous faith and then believed it was God that brought the healing instead of their faith. Very much like very often doctors prescribe sugar pills instead of morphine, and find that the patient responds very well as long as he believes it's morphine. In other words, his faith has made him free. So, you will discover that the basic healing principle of the infinite way, which is really an understanding of the nature of error, understanding its nature as non-existence, as appearance, as universal belief, as a belief in 2 powers. Understanding this is far more efficacious in healing than walking around saying, I am God. And that's a pretty powerful statement. But it doesn't do all the healing work that it should. Now, as you bring yourself to the realization that there is but one power, and I am not to be using one power over another, as you bring yourself to the place that there is nothing good or evil in this entire world. Only God is good and God is spirit. And nothing else has qualities. The qualities that we experience are the qualities, first, that universal belief has given them, and secondly, that we sometimes individually create ourselves. You have last month a concrete illustration of this. In 1935, a medical doctor came to me to ask to have some of these principles explained to him because he had witnessed some very wonderful healings. And in teaching him, I used as an example the universal belief that you can catch cold by sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet. And before I was through with him, I convinced him, I convinced the medical man that not even physically can you catch a cold by sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet, and that nobody ever has. And he saw that so clearly that he began to work with it to prove it. And then last month you undoubtedly read in the Reader's Digest that the medical world has accepted the fact that you cannot catch cold by sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet. Now, what about all the millions of people who have caught cold by getting their feet wet or sitting in a draft, and quite a few millions who still will in the future, until that story completely permeates consciousness? Well, you have the whole answer there. Neither the draft nor the wet feet were really powers. Therefore, giving medicines to overcome those powers was kind of foolish, wasn't it? When all of the time they weren't powers. It would have been far better just to quietly realize that there is no power but God, and let the draft and the wet feet take care of themselves. And from now on, that is exactly what the medical profession will have to do. They will have to tell their patients, you do not catch cold by getting your feet wet or sitting in a draft, so you might as well know that they are not power. Well, then we'll have to charge them for using our copyrighted material. But you see that eventually, just as we in our practice, we are proving that germs are not power, disease germs. We are proving that many conditions of health, ill health, are not power. So will Materia Medica eventually have to do the same thing, because they aren't power. They are only power where power is given to them. Just as sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet did actually cause cold. Not the wet feet, not the draft, but accepting the universal belief in their power. The power they didn't have, as is now announced. Therefore, it was placing a power where it did not exist. So it is that in metaphysics, people have suffered burns and found that with the right metaphysical treatment, they were quickly healed, freed of pain, and even had scars removed. Oh, I don't have to recount to you the history of spiritual healing. You know it as well as I do. But why I am bringing it up is to convince you that the power never was in the condition. The power was never in the disease. I read the other day an article in the paper that said that leprosy is the least communicable of all diseases, and quoted the illustration of one woman whose husband is in a leprosarium, and she wanted to be there with him, and she did everything in her power to contract the disease and hasn't been able to do it. And yet think of all the years when they separated families, isolated them, kept some people away from their families throughout their lifetime. Not because leprosy was communicable. Oh no. But because the belief was there, and as long as the belief was there, they had to act it out in human experience. But just remember that the power of communication was not in the disease. Now, how many more such things do you think will happen as the world becomes more enlightened, even medically? Well, I can think of this. How many years ago is it that a person undergoing surgery would be in a hospital 2 to 3 weeks and kept in bed for a week or 10 days? Today, within 24 hours, they stand them on their feet, and about 5 days send them home. Why, if that surgery had all this terrible power before, hasn't it got it now? What has happened to all that power? And as you will discover, the power never was there. And so it is that the Master, who is of all people best known as a healer and for his realized state of Christ consciousness, uses as his basis, resist not evil. Put up thy sword. All of which is stating there is no power out there. There is nothing to fight out there. Put up thy sword. Put up thy mental sword. Resist not evil. There is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Human thinking, not divine. For in the divine, as in the Christ consciousness of the Master, there was no sin. There was only forgiveness. There was no disease. There was only pick up thy bed and walk. The closer, then, that you work with these specific principles of one power or none power or neither good nor evil and impersonalization, which was one of the starting points of this entire message, you will remember that in all of the metaphysical teachings, evil has its rise in your individual consciousness. We're always searching your consciousness to see what caused the error. Uncover the error in you. Or search yourself to see what you are thinking or doing erroneously. And you see, the very first revelation that I had on healing work was that not one of the teachings was true. Because no error has its rise in your consciousness. I do not care what error you are expressing. It did not originate within you. And it can't be healed within you. You must lay the axe at the root. And the root of all evil is the universal belief in two powers. What Paul called the carnal mind. The mind of good and evil. When you lay the axe at the root, you don't have to treat a person. You don't have to treat a disease. As a matter of fact, I don't know how you could possibly know what disease a person has, because so much of it is mistaken identity. Once you can experience an understanding of these principles, that all evil is impersonal, that it does not have its rise in any individual, you will begin to have the secret of healing work, because you will not attach the sin, the disease, the wrong thinking, or anything to that individual. Well, I'm sure you know that, most of you do, that in the Roman Catholic Church, all evil is personalized. The sin is in you, and you are always being punished or going to be punished for the sins of your omission or commission. But this will no longer be. This too is being changed since Pope John has revealed that he discovered a philosophical doctrine. It's not to be found in the Catholic Church, but it is found in a philosophical doctrine that you must not attach the evil, the error, to the person, because they at all times have the full dignity of their humanhood. And regardless of how depraved they may become, they must not be blamed for their sins, because they have sufficient grace within them so that at any moment they may awaken to the fullness of their human identity. We call that fullness of human identity Christhood, spiritual sonship. And so it has been discovered in our practice for 30-odd years that when you stop searching for error in a person, when you stop blaming them for the error that they're committing, when you stop telling them that they have to stop it, and begin to realize that nothing in and of itself is good or evil, and that that which is Antichrist or so-called evil is the universal, the carnal, the mortal, the sense of two powers, the universal belief in two powers. And when you have thus impersonalized it, you have lifted your consciousness closer to the Christ consciousness, and then you discover why you do not have to resist evil. You do not have to tell sinners to stop sinning and thereby probably force them to do a little extra sinning, even against their own will. You do not have to tell nervous people they shouldn't be nervous. Of course not. Resist not evil. No. When these principles are lived with, until they lift you out of the consciousness that fears two powers, or fears a negative power, or even thinks of using a good power to overcome a bad power, when you are lifted to that consciousness, you will discover the prayer that is without words and thoughts, because now, when you're called upon for help for yourself or another, you don't have to think of the person, you don't have to think of the condition, you don't have to think of finding a God to do something or getting a God power to do something. You are now free to turn within and say, "Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth," and then just be still until truth reveals itself to you. It may voice it. When he utters his voice, the earth melteth. Not when you declare a lot of truth, not when you deny error, not when you affirm truth. When he utters his voice. Then again, God is not in the whirlwind. Power is not in the whirlwind. Power is not in the evil condition. Power, God, is in the still small voice. Do you want God? Do you want God power? Do you want God grace? Then be still. And when the still small voice speaks, you have it. Well, you say, "I have never heard the still small voice." Well, perhaps you haven't set aside 8 hours a day for trying for a few years. Try a program of 8 hours a day of listening for a few years and see if it won't happen. Where are you going to get those 8 hours? A couple hours less sleep, a couple hours less television, a couple of hours less this, a couple of hours less that, and first thing you know, you've got 8 hours all added up. Everybody has them. Everybody has 24 hours. The most people need for work is 8 or 9 or 10. The most we need for sleep is 6 or 7 or 8. What do we do with all the rest? Well, whatever we do, let's stop doing it. One of the ways of wasting time in the infinite way is with some of our do-gooders who are out to save the world before they have had the realization themselves. And oh, they waste so much time saving their neighbor. When they haven't yet attained being under the law of God or receiving that voice of God. If all of our students would leave this world alone and all their do-gooding complex until they find themselves in the spirit and find people dashing up madly to them, an experience which we just learned about today. A man who needed help healing heard in his inner self a name and a city. He didn't know the name and he didn't know well, he knew the city, but he didn't know the name, didn't know the identity. But he looked them up. When he called the man, sure enough, he was a practitioner. But this man who heard the name didn't know it. Evidently, he had some degree of listening in his soul. When the need was there, the still small voice told him where to go for help, and he received help. This happens many, many, many times, that people are directed to us either by hearing a name or being told about it. Or as one lady wrote in today's mail, that she is a very sincere student of the Infinite Way, having found her first copy in a trash can somebody had thrown away. Well, that's a divine leading. She must have been listening in order to be led there and to see it, because you could go to a trash can and it could be there and you wouldn't see it. There has to be a degree of listening, of inner seeing. For this reason, then, let us never forget, the more we work with these specific principles, the more we remember them consciously, the more we apply them in every circumstance of our experience, the greater we are developing our consciousness. Then when our consciousness is developed, we go within, and then the Spirit does the work. Then you really know what it means to be able to say that I don't know how to heal. I don't know how healing takes place. I, in particular, many of our students, do know the principles that will develop the healing consciousness. But after you've got the healing consciousness, you have no idea of how healing takes place. At least I haven't met anyone yet who knew how it takes place, and certainly I don't. It's a complete mystery how it is that I or someone else can just close their eyes and be still, and then all of a sudden pains vanish, sins vanish, false appetites vanish, lives are changed, and we witness that constantly, so we know it happens. But what takes place on that inner plane, we don't know. One thing we do know is this: we know why very often healings do not take place. And I mean when it is not the fault of the practitioner, when it is not a practitioner who is prematurely practicing. We do know this, that we are really not healers what happens when we are in the inner stillness is that the presence or grace of God is realized. And it does the work, whatever is necessary. But many who come to us do not come for a realization of God. They come and insist that we find them a companion or a new home or a new position or double their salary or remove the lump or remove the fever in a hurry. And we speak of the kingdom of God, and we're told we'll come to that later, after the supply has been demonstrated, or after the new home has been demonstrated, or the new husband or wife, whatever it may be. And in states of consciousness of that kind, healing is difficult and sometimes impossible. And the sad thing is that many people do not realize that they are that very state of consciousness. They very honestly believe they are seeking the kingdom of God, when if you were to tell them that, well, now, you know, you may not get this healing, very quickly they discover that they weren't interested either in the kingdom of God. And so it is that consciously and sometimes unconsciously, we really believe that we are on the spiritual path when we are only seeking to use the Spirit for some purpose. Now, you know how many times it is referred to in our writings and lessons that God is not a servant? And I think that if our students would remember that sentence often when they are turning to the Father, remember that God is not a servant, and jack themselves up and see if subconsciously they really weren't going in and asking God to do them a favor or bring about this healing or in some other wise be a servant. Whereas on the spiritual path there is but one attitude. We are servants of God. Now, the closer one becomes to being a master, the more a servant they are. And this you will very quickly discover, as many of our practitioners have, that the closer they got to a good healing consciousness, the less time they had for themselves, for their families, for their friends, for their amusements, their entertainments, the more time they were the servants of their patients, day and night and night and day. And those who have become teachers, and we have some very successful ones, are learning also. They are not only servants of their students, but they're becoming dividend payers for the airways and hotels. Oh yes, you begin to undertake to support all of the airlines and hotels and restaurants once you get onto this path too. Of course, the papers since August 16th, the tapes since August 18th, and the 5 teaching tapes are really going to be your taskmasters for a long time to come. They are deep, every one of them, I can assure you. They are very deep. And hearing them once or twice or thrice is really not even going to crack the surface. It's going to mean hard work with those, because they also develop consciousness. They also lead to this higher consciousness and bring you to the actual experience. Probably for this reason, I don't know why I'm in London. Unless it's just to tell you this, prepare you for Mr. Churchill's blood, sweat, and tears, only in a different cause. may be, however, that further light will be given to us, because during this period, since August, a whole new activity has opened to us in the infinite way. And this, I'm sure, I will have the opportunity of imparting to you while we're here. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, for being here. I had to play it out this time. I couldn't stop. So that's why I did it. Thank you so much for being in the healing group, the Mystical Eye healing group. So there are some interesting things in this tape. You might have recognized I put some of the tapes that Joel suggests or is referring to, which are like 6 tapes previous to his visit to London. And so there will be more. I put more online just for you to be able to listen to what he calls the new teaching in the last, say, in the last half year of his teaching. So that's interesting. I thought we should really listen to that and discover what it actually means. So this tape is then just after the Kailua private classes. So these are like 6 talks where he he shares about the new teaching. So in this London talk, you will see he will share about this too, just like he just said in the last part of the tape. But anyway, so that's to make it all complete. Thank you for everything. Great that you are here. I'm going to play a song and hope to see you soon. Thank you for everything. Thank you so much.